will be ours.
You lost this war before you started, fool.
Primary threat spotted. Moving into position. Neutralizing. Take cover! Strike from the sky, brothers! This planet is ours, witch.
No, this planet is theirs.
Hey there, citizens of the internet, it's the 8-Bit Academic here with another episode of gaming goodness and fun facts. Today's episode will be a little bit different, as in it will be all about the game I'm currently showcasing, or in this case, the popular franchise that the game is based off, simply because I'm trying to grow the channel by appealing to certain fandoms and internet subgroups, in this case, them Warhammer 40k fanboys, by taking advantage of the recent rise in popularity thanks to last year's successful release of the manliest game ever made, Space Marine 2, and to hopefully reach that 1000 subscriber milestone and beyond so that I can start to rake in some of that sweet YouTube ad money. Yes, I am totally going to sell out eventually because
only money that I want.
Don't act surprised when it finally happens, you have been forewarned.
If you don't want to give me a man, I will show you with your last born. Took him to shower or to the hot shower. I like to show you there I want money.
But if I have to be totally honest, I myself have also become quite the Warhammer 40k fanboy in recent months, even going so far as to get in arguments and debates about female custodians and whether the Imperium of Man is fascist or not in online forums and YouTube comments, simply because Warhammer 40k is f***ing awesome.
Burn, heretics!
After consuming hours of content from lore channels like Isander and Coda, Major Kill, The Remembrancer and Lotara Lore, just to mention a few, watching all those hilariously funny Guardsman Joe meme clips, and the Alex Jones ones where he seemingly fits extremely well into the Warhammer 40k universe, Watching the totally awesome Astartes Project, the Ultramarines animated movie from 2010, as well as the multiple short animated series The Tides, Pariah Nexus, The Exodite, and Hammer and Bolter, currently airing on Warhammer TV, and recently even trying out some of the games, such as the Dawn of War series and the boomer shooter Bolt Gun. Yes, I am going to play the Space Marine games eventually, when my wallet decides to stop being so empty. In the meantime though, here's some footage from Dawn of War 2, while I continue to forcefully share heresy memes with unwilling friends and family, whether they like it or not, and trying to convince everyone, including my girlfriend, that Warhammer 40k is the greatest work of art to ever be created in the entire history of humanity in the name of our Holy Emperor.
Hello. Would you like to talk about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ?
Welcome. This is Alexa. What is the purpose of the visit?
Jesus Christ.
I can inform the resident. What is your name?
I said Jesus Christ. Right now. Right now.
What is your message to the homeowner?
Now!
What else can I say about Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 2 other than it is amazing? Unlike the first installment, this one doesn't feature any base building and goes for a more action-oriented, tactical RTS approach, similar to games like Company Heroes or the original Syndicate games from the 90s. While many fans of the original Dawn of War may disagree with its approach to real-time strategy, I personally enjoy it, and I think their opinions are wrong and clearly a case of chaos-influenced heresy, which needs to be stamped out before its corrupting influence spreads to our beautiful paradise of holy terror. We already suffered enough thanks to the Horus heresy and don't need any more of that unholy way of thinking. Every Warhammer 40k game is beautiful and perfect in its own way, even if it is full of bugs, glitches, and even if the gameplay mechanics are completely different from what fans are used to. There is your full dose of Imperial propaganda for the day. Now go and say your daily prayers and show your devotion to your Emperor, lest the Inquisition come knocking on your door.
If you wanna go, then you go to hill and go down.
Why you get fried,
yes,
man?
why? Are you crazy?
You're fucking
You
paranoid,
are
man.
fucking, you are fucking.
You fucking, you bloody.
You bloody.
Fuck you, bloody. Bastard, bitch.
You
fuck you,
bastard,
fuck
you.
you. Bloody, fuck you, bloody. Fucking mother, bloody, fuck, bitch.
Bitch, you
Bloody,
what
fuck
do?
you. Fucking bloody bastard. Benchwood, bloody.
Banchot, you.
You blunder.
No, but why? Is
Bloody no.
Why?
Bloody
That
fucking.
is accident, then what you wanna
Why
do?
you fuck me? I fuck you, bloody. Bloody bastard. Fucking running like lady, eh?
Anyway, you have just wasted so much time listening to me ramble like a fundamentalist fanatic about how awesome 40k is. What else can I say except that I have become a hardcore loyalist and would fit in perfectly with the Black Templar Space Marine chapter, who happens to be one of my favorites. The game was a sequel to Dawn of War 1 and was released in 2001, being developed by Relic Entertainment and published by the now barely alive THQ for Microsoft Windows, and is currently available on Steam. So go and play it as your duty to the Galactic Imperium of Man.
We are under heavy fire and losing control of our flanks. Move north and provide support.
Salute, my brother, and go. You can watch.
There's been so much speculation from 40k fans like myself and others about the possible inspirations behind its grimdark universe, and while the discussions regarding it is extremely far and wide, with some Slaneshi cultists and filthy Xeno sympathizers going as far as claiming it's filled to the brim with fascist ideology, based at least on my own propagandized research, I have found that not only are such claims absolute heresy, and I'm calling the Inquisition hotline to deal with them as we speak, but that in reality, the truth of the possible inspirations behind 40k are not so easily defined.
Burn the heretic! Kill the mutants! Purge the unclean!
while yes, as I tread ever so carefully on the razor's edge of potential heresy, I will definitely agree that some inspiration was taken from Nazi ideology, especially with regards to imperial propaganda regarding the perfection and superiority of the human form versus the unnatural and inferior form of the mutant and the alien. It is more accurate to say that 40k is rather a mishmash of various political and religious ideologies, sci-fi and media tropes especially from the late 20th century, pop culture references, and even different counterculture movements like punk, football hooliganism, and even the various subcultures that formed in the late 70s and 80s among the British working class. And yes, while 40k has become a worldwide phenomenon today, it has most definitely had its roots in the British society of the second half of the 20th century, in particular the 70s and 80s, a time of rock and roll, drugs, flirtation with pro-anarchist ideas, and fears of nuclear annihilation due to the Cold War. For those who don't know, Warhammer 40k started out as a tabletop board game and still is to this very day, but has branched out into becoming a multi-media billion-dollar franchise, complete with books, action figures, graphic novels, comics, video games, films, TV shows, and more, as well as an ever-growing fan base who sometimes show their dedication to the Emperor by producing their own content in the form of lore videos, podcasts, short films, and sometimes fan art, including those of the Rule 34 variety, or so a friend of mine told me. The board game itself can be broken up into two hobbies, in which any potential fan can participate, in either one or both. One aspect is the fact that every set of figurines purchased through the means of going bankrupt for the rest of the month need to be hand painted first, after which the devoted recruit can either keep them as lovely ornaments in a display cabinet to show off to their friends who probably won't care, or once painted, can then use their armies to participate in mini tabletop war games, enacting battles quite similar to a highly advanced and overly complicated game of chess, and following a set of rules that Games Workshop keeps on changing over and over again whenever they feel bored. Warhammer 40,000 is set in the distant future, where a stagnant human civilization is beset by hostile aliens and supernatural creatures. The models and factions in the game are a mixture of humans, aliens, and supernatural monsters, wielding futuristic weaponry and paranormal abilities. The fictional setting of the game has been developed through a large body of novels published by Black Library, a publishing division of Games Workshop. Warhammer 40,000 was initially conceived as a sci-fi counterpart to Warhammer Fantasy Battle, a medieval fantasy wargame also produced by Games Workshop. Warhammer Fantasy shares some themes and characters with Warhammer 40,000, but the two settings are independent of each other. The game has received widespread praise for the tone and depth of its setting, and is considered the foundational work of the grimdark genre of speculative fiction. The word grimdark itself derived from the series' tagline, "In the grim darkness of the future, there is only war." Most Warhammer 40,000 fiction is set around, you guessed it, the year 40,000 AD. Though Warhammer 40,000 is mostly a sci-fi setting, it adapts a number of tropes from fantasy fiction, such as magic, supernatural beings, demonic possession, and fantasy races such as orcs and elves, with magic users such as wizards in the setting being called psykers. The setting of this game inherits many fantasy tropes from the aforementioned Warhammer Fantasy, and by extension even from Dungeons & Dragons, since Games Workshop used to make miniature models for that tabletop franchise as well. The setting of Warhammer 40,000 is a violent and pessimistic one. Human scientific and social progress have ceased. Humanity is in a state of total war with hostile alien races and occult forces, supernatural beings who are extremely powerful and are usually untrustworthy, if not outright malevolent. There are effectively no benevolent gods or spirits in the cosmos, only demons and evil gods, and the cults dedicated to them continue to grow and expand. In the long run, the Imperium of Man cannot hope to defeat its enemies, so the heroes of the Imperium are not fighting for a brighter future, but rather raging against the dying of the light. Through constant sacrifice and toil, the Imperium delays its inevitable doom. The tone of the game's setting exemplified by its previously mentioned slogan, "In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war." I needed to say it again because it sounds so damn cool. As the setting is based on a war game, the spin-off novels and comic books are often war dramas, with protagonists being warriors within one of the many armed factions within the game's setting, the most popular being the Space Marines. However, sometimes they can be from the perspective of aristocrats or powerful leaders of some sort, such as Inquisitors, Rogue Traders, Eldar Princes, Necron Overlords, Orc War Bosses, or Tau Commanders, because only such people and aliens have the resources and liberty to have a meaningful impact on the galaxy-spanning setting, whose civilizations are mostly autocratic and authoritarian. The source of magic in 40k is a parallel universe of supernatural energy called the Warp. Think of it as this universe's version of Hell, or that completely f***ed up dimension in Event Horizon that caused the entire crew to go insane and mutilate themselves, making many 40k fans believe that perhaps Event Horizon may have taken place in the Warhammer 40k universe. All living things with souls are tied to the Warp, but certain individuals, like the aforementioned Psykers, have an especially strong link and can manipulate the Warp's energy to work magic like space wizards. Unfortunately though, this means that Psykers are generally feared and mistrusted by other humans due to the fact that the Warp is full of predatory and supernatural creatures that may use a Psyker's link to the Warp as a conduit by which to invade real space. But for all the dangers that Psykers pose, human civilization cannot do without them. Their telepathic powers provide faster than light communication, and they are the best counter to supernatural foes on the battlefield, and also to allow spaceships to pass safely through the Warp when engaging in faster than light travel. For this reason, the Imperium rounds up any Psykers it finds and trains them to control their abilities and resist the Warp. Those who fail or reject this training are executed for potential risks to galactic Imperial security and to maintain the consciousness of the 90% dead Emperor stuck on the Golden Throne for the last 10,000 years, since he is the only Super Chad in the galaxy that can maintain the Astronomicon, a beacon in the Warp that allows for safe interstellar travel. If he dies, the Astronomicon would fail, leaving the Imperium vulnerable to chaos forces and demonic invasion, and effectively crippling galactic transportation and communication across the vast distances of space. Psykers who pass their training are pressed into lifelong servitude to the state, and are closely monitored for misconduct and spiritual corruption. So basically, they are stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Under arrest.
Look, I'm under what? Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest. What is the charge? Eating a meal? A succulent Chinese meal?
Now that we've got through the ever so basic explanation of what Warhammer 40,000 is, let's take a look at what were some of the early inspirations behind the lore for this now worldwide franchise. As I had mentioned earlier, Warhammer 40k was developed alongside Games Workshop's other flagship franchise Warhammer Fantasy, which has now been redubbed as Warhammer The Age of Sigmar, and borrows heavily from it by including some of those typical medieval fantasy elements into its grimdark sci-fi setting, where regular orcs have now become space orcs and regular elves have become space elves, and the Terminator-like Necron race being a sci-fi version of the Tomb Kings from Warhammer Fantasy. But the ideas behind all this go a little deeper, with the original creators of Warhammer 40k also citing the works of renowned authors like J.R.R. Tolkien, Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, and Frank Herbert, as also being key inspirations in the overall themes and lore of this grimdark universe, with books and stories like those found in Lord of the Rings, Dune, Conan the Barbarian, and the Cthulhu mythos, helping to create many of the ideas for the multitude of tropes found in 40k, and forming much of the foundation of its ever-expanding lore. One just has to look at the medieval fantasy elements in both Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Fantasy, now called Age of Sigmar, to see a bit of Conan and Lord of the Rings, and the idea of a galactic empire practicing a form of futuristic feudalism with a messiah figure at the helm definitely shows evidence of being inspired by Dune, whereas the various chaos gods who reside within the warp, as well as the other godlike beings like the Catan and the Old Ones, can directly be linked to H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu mythos. But aside from drawing inspiration from some of the greatest sci-fi and fantasy literature of the 20th century, Warhammer 40k has also drawn upon real-world politics, historical events, religious ideology, and pop culture as well, as noted by former Games Workshop creator Rick Priestley, who also cites the poem Paradise Lost, as well as the British sci-fi comic anthology 2000 AD as major influences, 2000 AD being the home of the iconic Judge Dredd character. The Chaos Gods themselves were added to the setting by Brian Ansell and developed further by Priestley. Priestley felt that Warhammer's concept of chaos was too simplistic and too similar to the works of Michael Moorcock, so he developed it further, taking inspiration from Paradise Lost. The story of the Emperor's favorite son succumbing to the temptations of chaos, as detailed in the Horus Heresy novels, deliberately parallels the fall of Satan in Paradise Lost. The religious themes are primarily inspired by the early history of Christianity, especially during the height of the Holy Roman Empire. Demons in 40k are the embodiment of human nightmares and dark emotion, given physical form and sentience by the warp, as lore dictates that the warp itself is a realm that is the very embodiment of negative emotions in the galaxy. This idea comes from the 1956 movie The Forbidden Planet. Chaos itself, as I have mentioned, carries a lot of influences from H.P. Lovecraft, such as mystical artifacts that drive people insane and secretive cults dedicated to the evil gods that exist within the warp. The Emperor of Man was inspired by various fictional god kings, such as Leto Atreides II from the novel God Emperor of Dune by Frank Herbert, and King Huon from the Runestaff novels by Michael Moorcock. The Emperor's suffering on the Golden Throne for the sake of humanity mirrors the sacrifice of Jesus Christ as told in the New Testament of the Bible. The humans in the Imperium have a fear of artificial intelligence, also dubbed as abominable intelligence, and the attempt at creation of AI is a capital offense within the Imperium of Man in the Warhammer 40k universe, and this is due to a period known as the Dark Age of Technology in the lore, wherein AI robots gained sentience and became known as the Men of Steel, and then proceeded to attempt to wipe out humanity, which led to a 10,000-year conflict between man and machine, which resulted in the humans winning because we're base as but at a great cost. This bears a resemblance to the Butlerian Jihad mentioned in Frank Herbert's Dune books, wherein a crusade is initiated by the last free humans in the universe against thinking machines, a violent and dominating force led by the sentient computer Omnius. Other sources for inspiration found in science fiction literature could also be from works like Isaac Asimov's Foundation series, as well as the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, and Starship Troopers by Robert A. Heinlein. I personally would like to think that maybe Dan Simmons's Hyperion Cantos may have also played a role. However, I think I may be a bit off on that since Warhammer 40k had already been established by the time of the first book's release, which was in 1989, but who knows, maybe there's some hope, just that I couldn't find any evidence for possible connection online. So what about real-world inspirations? Well, it turns out there are quite a few. As mentioned earlier, Warhammer 40k, especially in its early days, was absolutely British, being influenced by the late Cold War politics of the time, as well as popular trends and subcultures that defined the late 70s and 80s. However, much of the supposed real-world inspirations have either never been confirmed by Rick Priestley and co., or the origins of where they may have gotten some of their ideas from have changed over the years, as much as the lore has. Seems like Games Workshop can't help themselves when it comes to retconning things, even with regards to what inspired them. I guess old habits die hard. So with regards to this segment of the video, much of this will be based off what I managed to glean from online forums, articles and blogs, with a lot of it being attested to by people that were fans of the game in the 80s and 90s, drawing connections between real-world history, politics and other forms of pop culture. So take everything you hear now with a grain of salt, as I could not really find anything that confirms these as being definite inspirations from the original creators and lore writers themselves. But since Warhammer 40k is so much a part of British pop culture itself and originated in the late 70s and early 80s, it's not hard to imagine that at the time Rick Priestley and friends probably did express some of their feelings regarding the events going on around them in British society back then in Warhammer 40k, which the average working class English geek could relate to. The founders of 40k seem to have been a pretty knowledgeable and learned bunch, and this knowledge based not only in fiction but also included a thorough understanding of history, mythology and archaeology. It simply shows in their creation, just like its fantasy counterpart Warhammer 40,000 is steeped in knowledge and historical references, often carried lightly and with a parodic touch of exaggeration as befits the best of British humour. The entire premise of the 40k setting is that of a golden age long since gone to hell, of a descent into darkness, barbarity, ignorance and fanaticism. This is heavily based upon the decline and fall of the Roman Empire both in the East and the West, and the Dark Ages in general, but could also be a small nod to the end of the British Empire, which reached its height in the early 20th century, only for those damn Nazis to ruin everything by starting World War II because some Austrian guy with daddy issues was rejected from art school or something. The has-been Great Britain was then forced to let go of many of its colonies, especially in Africa and the East, after the end of the war, since it could no longer maintain its imperial hold on them due to both the infrastructural, economic and political strain the war had placed on the nation of poor dental colonizers, of which I am an unfortunate descendant because my teeth are also shit. Don't mind me though, I'm simply projecting my insecurities onto other people and being a dick about it. So many parts of the far-stretched British Empire would end up gaining independence to varying degrees of success in the form of civil war, and the Brits themselves will forever mourn the loss of their grand empire, but still be able to reminisce the glory days by visiting the British Museum and admiring all the shiny loot they got along the way. However, one can also look at the slow stagnation and eventual collapse of the Soviet Union, which Putin can't seem to get over, or just the last dying breaths of any empire in history as it slowly descends into incompetency, bureaucratic failure, corruption, infighting, division, decadence and anarchy, and a bunch of other nasty words. This kind of mirrors the Imperium of Man after the Horus Heresy, and now, during the currently ongoing Indomitus Crusade, wherein a fractured empire desperately tries to regain control over all its galactic territories, which had been separated from it due to the destruction and chaos that took place during that bastard Horus's betrayal and the Great Warp Rift, which now stretches across the galaxy. As mentioned before, there are some influences of the constant rise and fall of the historical Roman Empire and its eventual demise in 476 AD after losing majority of its territory in the east, as well as its attempted recreation as the Holy Roman Empire in 800 AD, complete with all its inquisitions and burnings at the stake for crimes of heresy and witchcraft, just like the Inquisition in 40k. The Space Marine chapters themselves could have been inspired by both Roman legions and medieval knights alike, with the Codex Astartes being similar to that of the chivalric code adhered to by knights of feudal Europe, or the oaths taken by members of knightly orders like the Knights Templar. Some of the Space Marine Primarchs as well are based on real-life historical characters like Julius Caesar, bearing resemblance to Reboot Guilliman and probably Charlemagne. And Chagatai Khan obviously being based off the real-life Chagatai Khan and his relatives Kublai, Ogadai and Genghis Khan.
Well, you're just talking like a Mongoloid.
I don't give a fuck. I am a Mongoloid. In my heart, I'm a Mongoloid. That is what I am. We are a horde. That is what we are. Yes, we are that. We are 100% that.
That's not something to be proud of.
It is something to be proud of, bitch, because the Mongols are the ones who created civilization. And you created nothing but barbarism. You're the fucking barbarians. You destroyed the treasures of mankind and civilizations. The Mongols only united it. You fucking bitch. You Can's cuck bitch. What the fuck do you know about civilization? What the fuck do you know about pride? What the fuck do you have to be proud of? Except looting, genociding, and destroying the cultures and peoples and wealth of this world.
I know there are more, but if I mention all of them, this video will never end. And it's already long enough. I definitely should have thought this one through a bit more, but I shall endure for the sake of your entertainment, because that's what a true son of the Emperor does. And just like the Space Marine chapters, the theme of fanatic religious wars are drawn primarily from the medieval centuries, inspired by the violent clashes of the Abrahamic religions like Islam, Judaism and Christianity, as well as the infighting that occurred in Europe during the Christian Reformation years, when hundreds of people across Europe opposed the papacy and broke away from the Catholic Church to form their own Protestant denominations. The inspiration for plagues, starvation, witch hunts, colonization attempts, pogroms, slavery, and alchemical mysticism are particularly drawn from the early modern and colonial periods, while the sheer cruelty and harshness of state oppression is plucked from all over known history, but mostly from the various fascist and communist dictatorships that sprung up in the 20th century, particularly Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, with Guardsmen Commissars being a combination of German SS officers and Soviet military commissaries. The 20th century was definitely a strong basis of inspiration behind 40k, its unraveling balance of global power with mass mobilization for revolution, war and class struggle. Inhumane deeds and various branches of extremist thought gave rise to a tide of hatred, oppression and brutal violence, ranging from the conventional warfare of both world wars through a long list of mass murder and genocide to chemical warfare, massive political purges, labor and extermination camps, barrier troops, human wave tactics, terror bombings, commissars, secret police and nuclear weapons of mass destruction. Not too dissimilar from the Imperium's last option of exterminatus when a planet has been completely overrun by Xenos, chaos or heretics. While the concept of the Imperium as a theocratic, religiously superstitious dictatorship is largely from a creative reimagining of the Middle Ages, the concept of the Imperium as a bloodthirsty police state mainly stems from the 20th century, pointing to authoritarian regimes with intelligence institutions formed to spy on their own people and eradicate any form of counter-revolutionary thought or action or any kind of behavior that would be deemed a threat to the state bureaucracy, such as the Soviet Chekists and NKVD, which eventually became the KGB, but also drawing inspiration possibly from the secret police organizations of the fascist regimes of the 1930s and other communist authoritarian states like Mao's China and Kim Il-sung's North Korea. Likewise, the willingness of some 20th century scientists to experiment on living humans relates quite strongly to the sheer inhumanity of the grimdark future of the 41st millennium. One can simply look at things like the Japanese and Nazi experiments in World War II, MK Ultra, Agent Orange, the first nuclear tests by various nations' armies on their soldiers, and many other incidents of scientific malpractice and inhumane experimentation. Lastly, with regards to the various xenos or alien races that pose a very serious threat to the last vestiges of this galactic human empire, there are many possible sources of inspirations we can look at as well, the most glaring of them being the Tyranids and Gene Stealers, who were almost definitely inspired by the Alien franchise and the disturbing works of H.R. Geiger. As mentioned before, the orcs and the elves were simply carried over from Warhammer fantasy, and probably have their roots in the aforementioned medieval fantasy works of J.R.R. Tolkien, Robert E. Howard, and Michael Moorcock. However, far from just being regular orcs and elves, the creative minds at GW decided to give them both their own unique flair, with the orcs being simultaneously based on British football hooligans with Cockney accents as if they belong in a Guy Ritchie movie.
He's better than good. He's a fucking liability.
Here, hold on. What do you think of these? We're selling hundreds.
Very nice, Harry. What's it for?
Oh, don't play innocent with me, Bazza. Spanking.
And on the only good thing to actually come out of Australia, other than the Big Les show and those hilarious memes of that Australian breakdancing chick at last year's Olympics, which is George Miller's Mad Max trilogy. And no, I'm not going to let you forget that massive embarrassment to your country, because it's funny.
Traveling in a fried-out combi on a hippie trailhead full of zombies. I met a strange lady, she made me nervous. She took me in and gave me breakfast. And she said, do you come from a land down under, where women glow and men wonder? Can't you hear the thunder?
The connection between 40k and Mad Max was on full display in the 1997 Warhammer 40k spin-off game titled Gorka Morka, and the very fact that the orcs themselves tend to somewhat resemble the raiders and wastelanders of the Australian outback in the Mad Max films, complete with their own improvised vehicles and weapons not too dissimilar from that of said raider gangs that supposedly run on the magic of Christmas, with orcs utilizing the power of faith to get all their ramshackled machinery to work, like how a televangelist claims he can make you filthy rich if you just believe and donate your entire monthly salary to his church.
We're getting closer to his return, and the closer we get to him, the faster things are going to happen, the faster the healings, the faster the deliverance, the faster...
Even with regards to the Eldar as well as the Tau, they both seem to draw heavy inspiration from Eastern mythology and philosophy. However, these space elves, or Eldar as they are called in 40k, seem to have a lot closer in common to their fantasy counterparts, being inspired from the standard fantasy high elf, even having somewhat of a similar backstory that they were once the dominant species in the galaxy, had a cataclysm of some sort, and now are playing second fiddle to mankind while slowly dying out. However, I do remember finding a Quora thread once though, where some commenter tried to draw parallels between the various Eldar factions and the types of political and class groups that were present in the mid-80s in England, saying that the elves in general may have been a parody or satire of the Tories. British conservatives who don't give two shits about the working man, or just based on upper-class British society as a whole, with all its royals, nobles, and sex scandals. See what I did there? A true 40k fan will know exactly what I'm referring to, especially regarding the Eldar.
I need to be fucked a lot, man. Get free food, free rent, and everything else, man. Here's the deal, man. Men from jail, homeless, or you're a thug, you want to come move in, your friend can move with you too, man. Free rent, you get a lease and a key. Fuck me. Piss on me, beat me, I'm home there now. You see me, you want to come over today and try it out, man. If you're in my building, try it out. You want to fucking piss on me, try it out.
The Tau, on the other hand, seem to be, in this universe, space communists, or so the memes have told me. But in reality are more a representative of Eastern societies throughout history, with a hint of their culture and philosophy as a whole, with the implementation of various caste systems and collective ideals about the greater good of society rather than the immediate desires of the individual. Oh, and anime. A shit ton of anime influence, like you can tell Games Workshop are fans of anime. The mecha suits used by the Tau are so Gundam and Macross inspired. And finally, this leaves us with the Necrons, who are basically just overpowered versions of Terminator with a slight Egyptian flair due to being carried over from the Tomb Kings in Warhammer Fantasy.
I'll be back. Me, that was a long ass video. It's true what they say about Warhammer 40,000. The rabbit hole goes deep and probably doesn't end. I mean, even currently I still learn new things about the lore on a regular basis. But then again, Games Workshop have been working on this project since 1987, when they published the first edition rulebook, so they have been crafting the lore for almost 4 decades. This was just a brief summary, or at least an attempt thereof, of the possible inspirations behind Warhammer 40k. And as I said earlier, a lot of it is just speculation by the fans of the franchise, who all seem to have different opinions and ideas. A lot of the inspiration though is quite blatant, and some of it has been confirmed with interviews with Rick Priestley and other former and current creators at Games Workshop. But whether it's all true or not, the beautiful thing about 40k is that it leaves enough room for fans to create their own stories and ideas within its vast fictional universe, and that's one of the reasons I've become such a devoted follower of our Holy Emperor. There is something for everyone here, and I will continue in my never-ending quest to annoy other people with tales of the Imperium's quest to burn the heretic, kill the mutant, and purge the unclean.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Oh, wow! Wow!
As always, thank you for watching. This has been my contribution to the glorious empire of mankind. Now go and do yours by sharing this video with your friends, subscribing to my channel, and remember, one like is a like for the Emperor. Ad Victoria, brothers and sisters. May the Emperor protect and keep thee from the corrupting powers of chaos. Now go with the Emperor's light as your guide.
I am a boy! This is a pattern! すが田沢だ。いいぞ田沢、相手はビビっておる。もっとボロクソにいったらんかい。いいねスティッチャー。ギブミアチューインガム、フライドチキンハンバーグ、ホットドッグ、アイムソーリー、ピゲソーリー。いいぞ田。ライデン、見るがいい。これがお前へのレクイエムだ。マッハパンチ。